I'm Linda Tobash. I'm Senior Advisor for Education, and I'm also Director of the Project Bridge program. And I have to say, it's through the hard work of these 8 youth ambassadors, from whom you're going to hear very, very shortly, that we owe what I think is going to be a very informative and stellar evening. As you can see on your seats, you had a program, and I also want to direct you to the back, which has all the students' names and the high schools they attend. We really are very proud of the students that the high schools produce. You know, this was a very competitive application process this year. So for those of you who are teachers, any teachers in the room, mentors, thank you for the good work that you've done with the students that you've worked on. As you can see, this is a very full agenda, and so without further ado, I am going to introduce our welcomer this evening, Thomas Byrne. He's President and CEO of the Korea Society. And Tom, thank you for being here with us this evening.
Well, thanks, Toby, and thank you all for coming here. I think this is actually the first time I gave an introductory remarks. Because I'm always traveling, but this is, as Toby said, this is one of our stellar landmark programs. It's our longest one too. And actually, I've known Toby for many years. We met when we were Peace Corps volunteers. I was in an epidemiology program doing something quite different than teaching, but I've gotten to know Toby, and Toby brings so much to the Korea Society, as you probably have found out traveling in Korea with her. And I'm really glad that we have Yurim, our newest staff member to the Korea Society, helping out in all of this. So welcome, family, teachers, friends, and guests of the Project Bridge Youth Ambassadors, both attending here in person today and virtually to our 2025 community presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with the Korea Society, we are a U.S. nonprofit 501c3, a nonpartisan organization that is solely devoted to promoting a better understanding and appreciation between the people of Korea and the U.S. And we also work on and focus on the importance of the U.S.-Korea alliance in ensuring peace and prosperity, not only in Northeast Asia, but now, since there's virtually no unconnected part of the world, globally. The Project Bridge Youth Ambassador Program, which is in its 32nd year, is the longest running of our education activities. It was established in 1993 in the wake of the 1992 LA riots by the then president of the Korea Society, former ambassador to South Korea, Donald Gregg. The goal was to build better understanding and respect between the youth of the Black communities and the Korean American communities, both in New York and in Los Angeles. The target audience was then inner city high school students. Over the years, the program has evolved to include a wider range of students, but all must be either juniors or seniors in New York City public schools. Further, while rooted deeply in helping U.S. students better understand and appreciate Korea, its culture and history, language, and governance, it also aims to instill in the youth ambassadors the insights and skills needed to bridge the gaps between people of different cultural heritages. So join me as I congratulate our 8 New York City youth ambassadors on their accomplishments this year, and we look forward to hearing you share your insights. So thank you. I should say one more thing. Toby runs these applications, and I've been watching as the applications roll in and then the acceptances. To get admitted to the Project Bridge Youth Ambassador Program is as competitive as a top-ranked college in the United States. So congratulations to all of you.
Thanks, Tom. And Tom is correct. Our acceptance rate this year was under 9%. So it was extremely competitive. Um, Recognizing that maybe not all of you are familiar with Project Bridge, I just want to do a very, very brief walk through history. As you can see, as Tom said, it was created in 1993, and it was originally called Kids to Korea. And as he said, it was a response to the riots in LA. So here you can see in 1993, it was bent on healing young Black New Yorkers to visit Korea to foster understanding. And in those initial years, it really was a collaboration between the Korea Society and churches. It was outreach to churches both in New York and LA to reach out to inner city kids, students who were at risk perhaps for joining gangs. In fact, Ambassador Gregg, when he went out to LA and initiated this program, he met with the Crips, right, and had an in with a former Crip and talked with them, and they were like, yeah, I don't want my younger sister, my younger brother, my niece, my nephew following in this. So there was a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, there was support from the community, but through the churches. Over years, it did. Well, I'll show you that. That's sort of several years in, so that's 1998, and we like to say then in Korea. And now, these are our New York youth ambassadors from whom you're going to be hearing from very, very shortly here at the Korea Society in front of our exhibit that we had in the fall. There's now 3 sites, 3 formal sites and 3 collaborations between these sites. New York, the Korea Society since the inception. Los Angeles, the Pacific Century Institute, which became a partner, a co-partner, very early on, probably within the first, definitely within the first 7 years or 6 to 7 years. And in 2019, and that went on for years and years and years, but in 2019, Montana, the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center at the University of Montana became a partner. We reached out to them. They were very open. As you know, many of you, Maureen and Mike Mansfield was ambassador to Japan for many, many years. He was a senator, and he was committed to East Asia in many ways, and our speaker actually can correct me in a bit if I'm wrong on this, but I think he did lay the format for sort of U.S. approach to East Asia when he was ambassador in Japan back in the 60s. And I think that, but you could correct me when you speak if I'm wrong on that, but he was very, very interested in Korea. And he wrote, I think, his master's thesis on Korea because he looked at Korea and he said, we have to keep an eye on Korea. There's great potential there. And so that's where his archives are. He was a senator from Montana. And obviously, where as we look, the program evolves over time. For example, it was inner city youth working with churches. It was to bring the Black and Korean American community together and have better understanding. But over time, it's evolved, right? And so if we begin to look at challenges of cooperation between people across the U.S., obviously there's a greater rural-urban divide. And so Montana was added to bring that royal voice, that rural perspective, and also indigenous, which each of our groups, there's usually anywhere from 2 to 3 indigenous students that join that group. So that's been since 2019. Each group selects 8 students. So for many of you who are on the program, you remember it as perhaps 16 students going to Korea. We now have 24 students who go to Korea. This is the full group, and you're going to see a similar photo in a little bit, but that's a full group at what is the original DMZ line prior to the 38th parallel, prior to the Korean War. And so some of them are half are standing on South Korea, half are standing on what was North Korea. An interesting point from the Korean War. I believe the only country that actually gained some land was South Korea. So right now, both of those, that line is in South Korea. The program has three components, and those of you who are family know that I'm dragging your students here on Saturdays for 4 or 5 hours for workshops, or we have 2-hour virtual workshops. And the New York students have had a total of 15 workshops, lasting from anywhere to 2, on average on Saturdays, 4 hours. That's to learn about Korea, its history, its culture, its education systems, its governance, but also we build leadership skills, and we build intercultural competence skills to be global citizens. So those are the sort of 3 big components of the workshops that we have. The highlight, of course, is the 10-day study tour that you'll be hearing a lot about, and then today's community presentation. The component of outreach to the community has been part of the program since its launch. At that point, it was actually training the students to be able to go into the communities and act as advocates for better understanding, advocates for peace. So this has been a key component, these 3 components since the beginning. And now, without further ado, I'm really thrilled that we have remarks that Dr. Perez, who is a visiting assistant professor at the Cooper Union, we always just say Cooper Union in New York, right? But it is the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art. He's also a 2007-2008 Project Bridge Youth Ambassador from New York. And I forgot to ask you which high school you were from. Yeah, Townsend Harris in Flushing. And so once you hear him speak, you're going to know that you have big shoes to fill as you go along in your careers. But just a little bit of background. Dr. Perez is a historian of modern Korea, specializing in diplomacy and decolonization in the Cold War. And I could tell you much more, but again, because we're on a tight schedule, I'm limiting it somewhat. He holds a PhD in history from University of Chicago and a BA in Asian Studies with honors from Williams College. As I said, he was a former Project Bridge youth ambassador when he was in high school and in Flushing. And also, I want to let you know that he's also a board director on the Friends of Korea, for those of you who are familiar with Friends of Korea, and many of the Project Bridge students are aware. So without further ado again, Dr. Perez. Down below, and we can move this out of the way, and it's the down.
Thank you. Let's adjust the mic a little bit. Can everybody hear me all right? Yes? Thumbs up. Okay. Hello. So that I don't drone on for too long, I prepared some remarks. And I will read them once I gain access to them. Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to speak with this particular group of students tonight. That's because I stood in your shoes when I was in high school, and I served as a Project Bridge Youth Ambassador from 2008 to 2009. So I want to focus our attention on the accomplishments of this year's students. So I'll try to remain brief in my remarks, but I'll focus on my own story, not so that you'll follow my path step by step, but so that you have a sense of what is possible after embarking on a journey of which Project Bridge is only one step. So without question, participating in Project Bridge shaped my life and career trajectory in really unexpected ways because I was born in Washington Heights to Dominican parents and I was raised in Flushing, Queens, right? So I applied to the Youth Ambassador program because my older sister Carla had participated in the program just a couple years before me. I credit her with opening my eyes and encouraging me to pursue opportunities that facilitate exchanges between people of different backgrounds through experience-driven work. And so participating in Project Bridge workshops was like participating in another academic course of study on top of the demanding schedule that I'd already subjected to myself to at Townsend Harris in Flushing. So I'm sure it's no different for all of you because I've read your bios, right? So in the final analysis, I hope that the current ambassadors will agree when I say that it was worth it. That's because the curriculum for Project Bridge informed the way I still see the world today. In my year, we read and discussed books such as Don Lee's Yellow, right alongside Junot Diaz's Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. We also, of course, learned about Korean history and culture along the way. And studying Korean language with Project Bridge opened me up to studying additional languages in college, including Mandarin, some more Korean, and revisiting Spanish. So up until then, I had only taken Spanish and Latin in high school. Thinking about all these threads under the unified structure of the Project Bridge curriculum with cultural understanding as a guiding principle showed me how to make connections across difference. It showed me that understanding multiple histories and where they converge and where they diverge was essential to understanding the world. So being the historian that I am, I did some archival research and dug up my materials from way back when, notebook that I took with me to the trip, right? I went back and I looked at the itinerary for the group's time in Korea. Some of the partners from that era remain program partners today, demonstrating, I would say, the resilience of the program all these years. So we left on Tuesday, April 7th, 2009, and returned on Sunday, April 19th, 2009. So I'm sure you're all curious about what's in these materials because I was too when I found them again in a box somewhere deep inside my closet. I'll read an excerpt from the notebook now, because on the eve of the trip, we were asked to share our expressions for what we could accomplish by completing the study tour. I wrote, quote, "I expect this trip to give me a different view of life. I will be on the other side of the world. So my exposure to this new experience should lead to my appreciation of culture in general." Later on in the entry, I mused about how I will be perceived, adding, quote, "Will Koreans regard me as a great marvel, or will they accept me and treat me as if I'm not a couple of heads taller than they might be?" Before trailing off into my final musings and writing, also, what will the food be like? Will it be anything like the food I ate at the Korean restaurant I went to in Queens? These are the ramblings of someone unaware of the profound impact the study tour would have on them. Because I read this message and it demonstrates the ways in which the program pushed me to consider me, my family history, and my position in the world. And once I began the search for how to define my own humanity, I could also begin to recognize how humanity manifests in others. Engaging with the person across from us requires us to see that humanity, and Project Bridge helped me get to the place where I was beginning to ask and answer essential questions in a consciously rigorous manner. Another excerpt, because I had fun looking at this notebook. During our tour, we went to the DMZ. And I remember that moment as one that stuck with me, but I don't remember making these notes, which are scattered, but not entirely coherent. And in this notebook, the notes begin, quote, "Highway to DMZ, ... swerving around barricades, ... farmland behind barbed wire fences, electricity carrying info, or not, goosebumps, red eyes welled up, and in parentheses, I know, I'm a sap, and the entry crescendos with, quote, "silence. Bus comes to a near stop, surrounded by barricades." That visit shaped my questions about Korea, about Cold War divisions, about the legacies of colonialism, and I often return to that moment when people ask why I've pursued the path that I've taken up to this point. I know, I'm a sap. The DMZ is one place of many in the study tour where I had this visceral reaction, and I've sought to replicate these forms of impactful experiential learning in all that I do now. So I should also note that my youth ambassador experience is responsible for my college choice. Because while we were in Korea, LA group leader Robin Kim asked me where I wanted to go to college. I wasn't quite sure yet, but I was interested in living away from New York City, somewhere remote, with an emphasis on the liberal arts. So I mentioned that I'd heard about this little place called Amherst College. She looked at me, shocked, and said, "Have you heard of Williams College?" Because it turns out that Williams and Amherst are rival schools. So I told Robin that I hadn't, and she encouraged me to look into it. And then later on during the trip, she encouraged me to look into it again because Williams alums, as I learned, are very, very fiercely loyal, right? So I wound up visiting Williams College campus in the fall of my senior year of high school and applying early. And my college essay was about my time as a Project Bridge youth ambassador, specifically about my time singing a Spanish song in Norebang with one of my hosts, right? So I can also credit Project Bridge for opening the doors to a liberal arts education that shaped this trajectory that I'm bringing you all through. And so at Williams, I majored in history and Asian studies, and I took classes in Mandarin and Korean language. I studied abroad in China, and I returned to Korea as well for another study tour. All throughout my travels in college, I carried with me that desire to connect with the people, the places that I visit. And later on at Williams, I met former Ambassador Donald Gregg, because he's also a Williams alum. We talked about the early versions of the Kids to Korea program that you were just introduced to, and those emerged after the Los Angeles uprisings of 1992. We also talked about my experience as a Project Bridge Youth Ambassador and what had transpired in the years from the program's inception up until my time as an ambassador, and looked into the future as well. So after Williams, I lived in Korea for a year. And so while I was out there, I said to myself that I would remain in Korea until I got into grad school. It turns out that my first round of applications yielded one acceptance, and it was to the school that I wanted to go to, the University of Chicago. There, I studied under historian Bruce Cummings, who was my dissertation chair and remains a trusted advisor to this day. So after completing my PhD, I was a postdoctoral associate at Yale, and there I also returned to Korea to speak at Ewha Women's University for a lecture that I delivered as well. So through my work, I've had the pleasure of continuously returning to Korea each time, a new experience, whether it's for language study or research or somewhere in between. I found myself coming back to Korea, with this being the first moment. And so my time at Cooper Union here in New York is also now punctuated by efforts to teach courses in Cold War history, in Korean history, and in global history. But I still maintain this effort of trying to figure out, okay, what is something that I can teach that can facilitate an understanding of someone's place in the world? How are we navigating the world, and how are we seeing ourselves in our own positions through this study? And what does it all mean for you, ambassadors? I want to be clear. Project Bridge is a different experience for everyone. I don't expect you all to run off and get PhDs in history with a focus on Korea. That's not the point. So what I can expect from you all is that you can take your experience seriously, and that you continue to reflect on it even after tonight, and that you understand that you can spend a lifetime building bridges in whatever path you choose, and that you can develop an understanding of your place in the world and the histories of your peoples by continuing to experience different cultures alongside your own. There's no sense of isolation here, because I'm here today because of the Project Bridge program and its impact on my own life. But I'm also here to ensure that Project Bridge continues into the future, right? The sustained health and longevity of the program can and should rely on those who have participated in it, including you all, right? So those who have gone out into the world and have stories to share of their own, just like you've heard mine, right? So to this year's Youth Ambassadors, I hope this brief look into my life is something you'll carry with you as you continue your own journeys, but let's continue the conversation, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perez. That just really was wonderful, and I think very inspirational. And thank you for correcting me on the year. I'm going to have to go back and check our, we have a master alumni list that goes back with names all the way to 1993, and with emails and addresses that were existent then, but to actually 1992. I think 1992, 93. And I know, and I think it's a testament to what Dr. Perez said about, keeping this alive and talking to people about your experiences, because I look around this room and I'd like everyone who is an alumnus of Project Bridge, either as a youth ambassador or as a group leader, to please stand up. And it's wonderful. Every year we do get a very, very, very nice turnout of folks. So I'm hoping that at the reception, at our dinner, that you have time to chat with this group, give them your words of wisdom, etc. And again, we're really very, very appreciative. So now for what you've all been waiting for, which is the community presentations. So that's like an airplane, because most of our presentations are focused, well, they're all focused on our study tour. And so just so that you know the order, you can see from the program, we're going to be talking about life in Korea and what insights the youth ambassadors gained, what they learned about Korea, but what they learned about living in Korea, life in Korea, the people of Korea. And we are going to start with Leila, who's going to talk about school. And what's going to happen is they will introduce the next speaker. Okay, so over to you.
Hi, my name is Layla. My name is Layla Tilton. I recently graduated from KIPP NYC College Prep High School, and I will be attending University of Pennsylvania in the fall. So I will be discussing the facts about Korean education. So this is a timeline demonstrating the Korean education system found on the Ministry of Education in South Korea. Korean schools are very similar to American schools, but what makes them different is their schooling ladder, with high school being 3 years, whereas high school in America is 4. Korean students have many options for high school, whether it be an open high school, which is a high school attached to industrial firms, trade high schools, other specialized high schools, boarding schools, etc. In Project Bridge, we typically visit 3 high schools, but in this trip, we only visited 2 because of midterms. The 2 that we visited are Jeonbuk Foreign Language and Pungsan High School, which are both boarding schools. But what makes them different is that Jeonbuk, as I said in the previous slide, that there are specialized schools. The students at Jeonbuk choose a language that they want to study. Some do German, Spanish, Chinese, etc. And these are pictures from both of our experiences. And you even have a picture of one of the classrooms. That's the first year Chinese classroom in the top image in the middle. That's the Chinese classroom. And you can even see us, the gymnasium of the Punsang High School, their field, and us playing games with the students. So now I'm going to be talking about the semesters. Their first semester starts in March and ends in July. And their second academic semester starts in August and ends in December. Why is this? Traditionally and historically, schools would not have heating in the winter. That's why it ends around the time it does in the second academic semester. And for the summer, it's their summer break. Now, moving on to societal norms and goals. Students spend around 12 to 16 hours studying for exams. Seniors prepare, which are third years in Korea, prepare for Suning, which they take in the fall and November. Students typically spend their whole life preparing for this exam, as it is one of the most rigorous and challenging exams in Korea. During this time, Korea basically shuts down, in a word. The airports stop operating, and the streets are typically kept empty to allow students to concentrate on the exam and to get to the exam on time, as the Suning is around an 8-hour long exam. Most students who don't go to boarding school go to hagwons, which are like cram schools, and they stay after school right after school they go to these hagwons until around 11 p.m. Hagwons are sometimes more indicative of a student's performance compared to that of their school performance. And this was very evident to us when at Punsang, the students had told us that once we leave around 9:30 to 10 p.m. on Friday to go back to our hotel after a very exhausting day, they would go back to the library to study until 11 p.m. as they had midterms coming up that following, like around the same time we were there. Additionally, on Saturday, we visited Andong Village and a mask museum, which Andong is known for their traditional Korean mask. After we departed from our trip and time with the students at these 2 locations back to Seoul, to going to Seoul, the students told us that they were going back to school to study. Lastly, after their 3rd year, some students pursue higher education. Typically students pursue higher education. And we visited 2 of these forms of higher education, POSTECH and Ewha Women's University. This represents options for higher education the high school seniors have available to them in Korea. They have schools like POSTECH, which is the Pohang University of Science and Technology, that focuses on STEM, or like their main focus is STEM. And then Iwa Women's, which is an all women's university. Thank you. Now I'll be passing this on to another fellow Project Bridge Youth Ambassador, Natalie, who will be talking more about the specifics and differences between American and Korean schooling.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Colawazo, recently graduated from Mesa Charter High School. And while Layla dived into the intense study schedules and routines students are accustomed to, I want to talk about the culture within the schools, more specifically, what it felt like to be there as a student from New York City. So before going to Korea, many of us had a stereotype in our minds about what the students and the school environment would be like, mostly based off what we've seen online, in dramas, or just through general assumptions. The expectation was strict, ultra-studious students with no time for fun. Simply super formal, quiet, solely focused on grades, and not really expressive or outgoing. We sort of thought we would have no connections because of the existing cultural barriers of how different we were. However, what we saw was different. So what were they really like? Once we stepped foot into a Korean school, we realized that while some of our expectations had some truth, they barely scratched the surface of what Korean student life is actually like. The reality was, Korean students have vibrant personalities, they played sports, they listened to Western music, they loved fashion, and they joked a lot. It was totally different from the robotic stereotype, and it was amazing to see how they expressed themselves. When visiting Pongsang High School, one student even gave himself the English name Drake and fully owned it like a celebrity, and that just showed how playful they were. Students shared their Instagrams, asked about New York City, and they were genuinely curious and open to get to know us and connect with us. But honestly, want to know one of the biggest culture shocks? The cafeteria. Coming from New York City, schools, we weren't ready for how different and how much better their lunch setup was. In Korea, lunch felt much more structured and shared, meals were balanced and served in one complete tray, usually with rice, kimchi, soup, some type of meat, vegetables, and everyone got the same meal. Everyone ate together at long cafeteria tables, and we didn't see small booths separating students by friend groups. What stood out even more was the etiquette. After eating, students were expected to clean up after themselves, returning trays, wiping tables, and they actually did it without being reminded to. No one was running around, shouting, or playing with food. Everyone just sat, ate, and had a calm break before going back to class. It made the whole lunch period feel much more respectful and kind of even peaceful, something we don't always get back home. In the end, what stood out most was how different reality was from what we expected. Yes, Korean schools were structured and respectful, but they weren't cold or robotic. Students had personalities, passions, and a clear sense of community, whether it was through the way they treated us, the way they carried themselves, or how they even handled lunch. The etiquette and discipline we saw didn't come from pressure. It came from pride and from being part of something bigger. And that kind of mindset doesn't just shape who they are as students, it also prepares them for what comes next. And to give us a closer look at how Korean students approach their future and prepare for that next level, Tyler will now walk us through the work environment and the hardworking culture that shapes Korean life.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Pantacook. I'm a rising senior at Gotham Tech High School, and I will be talking about work and industry. And so, as Natalie just explained, working hard is an intrinsic value instilled in Korean students. The idea that your work ethic is part of who you are is deeply rooted within Korean culture. You can find traces of it going back centuries, intertwined with the values of Confucianism. Confucian values include discipline, respect for authority, and the importance of fulfilling one's role within a group, all of which have translated into workplace norms. But much more recently than the creation of Confucianism, we can see all this play out in the Industrial Revolution, which occurred in Korea in the 1960s and 1990s. And now this was due to a man, this is because of a man named Park Ji-hung. Park Ji-hung was the third president, Park Chung-hee, sorry. Park Chung-hee was the third president of South Korea, and he knew that his country was still devastated from the Korean War, which had only ended about less than 10 years than the start of his presidency. And so he realized modernization and industrialization were the keys to improving the economic standings of his country, something he outlined in his famous 5-year plans. He also knew that he could rely on the people of his country and their strong work ethic to help him achieve this. That is why he, along with the entirety of the government, turned to companies known as chaebols for help with this monumental endeavor. Now, chaebols are large family-controlled business conglomerates that play or have played a significant role in the development of South Korea's economy. These are companies such as Hyundai, LG, and Samsung, some of the most popular and well-known companies in the world. They became instrumental in the rapid growth of South Korea as they worked in tandem with the South Korean government. The government provided them with financial aid, the development of infrastructure, as well as trade policies that directly benefited them so that these companies would be able to focus on exporting goods and improving the economy of Korea. Other companies and organizations not regarded as chaebols, such as POSCO Steel and the Korean International Trade Association, shortened to KITA, as well as other small businesses, were just as contributory to aiding South Korea to one of the most remarkable transformations in the world. In a historical event now known as the Miracle on the Han, South Korea went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to becoming an economic powerhouse. Now, this economic domination can absolutely be attributed to the work ethic and innate sense of pride that the people of Korea have in their work. Without hard work and countless hours of effort that span decades, it would not have been possible for Korea to become that powerful in that short amount of time. While we were in Korea, we could see this pride. We could see how devoted each person was to the work they were doing. For every single business and shop that we went into, we were greeted with smiles and delight to help us. While we were in Seoul, we went to a street market and it was filled with people looking for something good to eat. Yet despite the crowdedness, wherever anyone went to get food, the people working there were so nice to help them and seemed happy that they were stopping by to try some of their amazing food. And this also went for large corporations we visited. Every single tour guide we had was incredible to us and more than happy to answer any questions we had. When we visited Kita, the vice president of the North American division was on his way out of the building to catch a plane, and he still made the time to visit our group and give a wonderful speech. And this is a picture of all of us, and it kind of just shows you how nice they were and how dedicated they are to investing time in their companies. It truly showed us how devoted the people of Korea are to their work and even how devoted they are to the companies that employ them. And this commitment that Korean people show to the companies they work for is unmatched. Deeply ingrained in Korean society alongside a strong work ethic is the loyalty shown to your employer. It is very common for Korean people to work for the same company their entire lives and slowly progress through the ranks as opposed to switching more often to try and find better opportunities. When we visited Hyundai, we learned that the average time a person will work there is 18 years. For reference, the average amount of time someone will work the same job in the United States is just over 4 years. The loyalty you show towards the company you work for is indicative of your work ethic in Korea. The same kind of thing goes for the companies towards their employees. Even large corporations with thousands of employees still find ways to care for their workers as well as the country overall. The main headquarters for Hyundai is in a city called Ulsan. Ulsan was a small village that survived primarily from fishing. But today, Ulsan is a major city, and a large part of this is because of the support that Hyundai has provided for the city of Ulsan. They built residential buildings and invested money in the school system in Ulsan to improve the education and to make sure it could support a large increase in population. The city of Pohang is home to the headquarters of POSCO Steel and has greatly benefited from the company. POSCO provides jobs for thousands of people and also improves the city. A famous tourist attraction that we were able to visit is on your left. It's the Pohang Spacewalk. And it is made completely out of POSCO Steel and is also maintained by the company. POSTECH, which the emblem you can see on the right, is a top university both in Korea and in the world, and it is run through POSCO Steel. POSCO makes it possible for all students who attend their university to go there for virtually free. There are also many benefits for workers. When we visited both Hyundai Automotive Plant and POSCO Steel Plant, our guides pointed out countless services and resources for employees. This included medical centers, places to eat, and group lounges. These are all designed and created to enhance the experience of the worker and make them happier while they're at work. Another design that is meant to create a nice work environment is the nature and green space that is integrated into the workspace. For many of the businesses we went to, nature surrounded the work environment and made for a very nice and relaxing experience. Even at the large manufacturing plants like Hyundai and POSCO, there was still a lot of green space which helped to create a very nice place to work. The POSCO Steel Plant in Pohang is 9.5 square kilometers, which is a little over 3.6 square miles, and almost a full square mile of the plant is all green space with almost 2 million trees planted and cared for within the grounds. And all of this is done to help the workers feel safe and comfortable and to help the country. Now, this is a picture of the Boeing Everett factory in Washington State. As you can see, there aren't many trees planted within the grounds, and almost 1 million trees were cut down to make space for this factory, which kind of just shows you how dedicated companies are to their country and the environment they create in the United States and then in Korea. Now, if you're wondering why we aren't showing any pictures of the grounds of POSCO or Hyundai, if you're a former youth ambassador, you may know this, but there are security concerns, and so we weren't allowed to take any pictures inside the grounds, but all 8 of us can assure you that it was very beautiful. And so the work ethic of the Korean people helps to shape the country in so many ways. It's the driving force behind South Korea's rapid transformation from a war-torn nation to a global economic powerhouse. From the determination of small business owners on local streets to the innovation and commitment found within the nation's largest conglomerates, the Korean spirit of perseverance and pride in one's work shines through. This dedication doesn't just build company, it builds communities, strengthens national identity, and creates a culture where success is shared and celebrated. The tireless effort of generations has not only fueled economic growth, but also inspired a deep sense of loyalty, purpose, and pride. Ultimately, it is this remarkable work ethic that continues to shape Korea's future. Although with all that intense work, there has to be some time for relaxation, so Harkwin will now talk to you about leisure.
Hey, good evening. My name is Harkwin Rodriguez, and I just graduated from City College Magnet School of the Arts, and I will be going to Macaulay Honors at CCNY. And today I'll be talking to you about Korean leisure activities. So I will be going over the food market, games, karaoke, archery, and keychain making. So I would like to start with this photo right here, which shows one of the markets that we went to, and there are many different foods on there. It was really packed as well. And in this food market, we saw a lot of tteokbokki, tornado potato, sundae, kimbap, fried chicken, and tenwon bread. And one of my favorites and other youth ambassador favorites was baby crabs. They were very delicious. And I know a lot of people come to Korean street food markets to stop by, not only to eat, but also because the prices are affordable and it is very convenient. People come here to spend time with others, build connections with the people around them. Then I would also like to go on the topic of games. So first, we're gonna start off with takchi, and if I could bring Layla and Tyler up here, please. They will be demonstrating how to play as, well, I will be saying how to play as they are doing it. Or do you have enough space there?
Yeah.
Okay. So takchi, you can start if you want. Okay, takchi is a traditional Korean game where players flip their opponent's tile by throwing their own tile at it. Players take turns throwing, and the winner is the first to flip all of their opponent's tiles. This can be demonstrated through the popular show Squid Games, where the characters get recruited. This game is associated with many of Korea's childhood memories and is still popular across many generations. It could also be enjoyed anywhere, at any time, like right now. In fact, we made our tiles with the Korean students we met as we got to know them a bit more. We played against each other, and some even formed a circle around the really close games, and they had very amazing reactions to us. Did anybody win yet? No. Okay. Okay, yeah, Tyler will stay up here as we will be demonstrating chegi chagi. Oh wait, hold on, actually. So the chegi chagi player, Tyler, will kick a chegi, a paper cloth, or a cloth shuttlecock. Here, this one was provided to us by Linda. Here you go. He'll be throwing it into the air with his feet to keep the chegi up for as long as possible without it falling. Usually this is played with multiple people. The person with the most consecutive kicks wins. Chegi chagi is often played during holidays like Lunar New Year and Chuseok. However, there has been a decline in its popularity. Therefore, South Korean schools have integrated chegi chagi into their physical education curriculum to preserve this traditional game. I believe this game would interest many soccer players, as it's kind of like dribbling a tiny soccer ball. And I myself have played this game with my Korean partner. You can pick it up. Except we tried to see who would go up to 3. And we tied with a score of 2. And we gave up to try other games. Thank you, Tyler. Oh, thank you, Layla, too. One of the other games we played is Haligali. Okay. In Haligali, players race to spot sets of 5 identical fruits, no more, no less, and ring the bell first. The player that rings the bell first collects all the face-up cards and adds them to their pile. I'm sorry, it's opening. Okay. The person that is left with all the cards is the winner. Although it may not be a traditional game, it is very popular for family game nights and social gatherings due to its easy-to-learn rules and very exciting to ring the bell. And this was my favorite game out of all the games we played. The students were so good that they made it to the finals all the time together while we had our hands on our ears waiting to ring the bell. Me and a few other Project Bridge ambassadors have gotten better at this game, so I think it's safe to say we want a rematch. And it was a very fun game to play. The next game is Kongi. This is also shown on Squid Games, I believe, season 2. And the goal is to progress through 5 rounds by tossing and catching the stones in various ways without dropping them or touching the wrong ones. It is simple to learn and can be played anywhere by people of all ages and abilities. It is a traditional Korean game passed down through generations. It kind of reminds me of Jack's, but it's slightly harder. And unfortunately, I personally did not play this game with the students, although many other Project Youth ambassadors were able to. However, thanks to Kita and other sites, we were very humbled to receive many gifts. And in terms of Kongi, Kita has given us our own to play with, just as you can see on that picture. We got those same exact ones. And this used to be my mom's favorite game. Next is Rumicube. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have played this, as it is a game you can find here in the US as well. And in this game, players aim to get rid of all their tiles by forming sets and runs. Players can add tiles to any sets and runs on the table or mixing them to create new combos. Many Koreans have played Rumicube since childhood. Its ease of play and it makes it accessible to a wide audience. It is often played during leisure time, family gatherings, or with friends. It is considered a game that's easy to learn and fun to play, making it suitable for various social settings. The Korean students were exceptionally good at this game, and it was my first time playing with them. Next, I would like to go on the topic of karaoke. Korean karaoke is slightly different from the karaoke that we know. They have this music book where you would expect it to be a whole bunch of Korean songs, but they do have a lot of Western music as well. And I'm pretty sure they update it from time to time. They also have this, the machine, where it gives you a score based on how well the machine thinks you sang. I would say this leads to healthy competition, which many youth ambassadors went through. We were split into 2 rooms to sing, and when we got a really high score, we would go to the other room to see what their high score was at the time. And we came to a tie of 99 points out of 100. All that competition was a great way for us to debrief and bond with each other. Next is archery. Korean archery has a slightly different bow from Western archery. They also pull back with their thumb instead of their index finger. They typically shoot at a higher angle. We went to try it out as youth ambassadors, and I would say it is harder than it looks because I didn't land a single shot. But I remember many youth ambassadors did very well. I believe Layla got a bullseye. Yes. And right here we also have another youth ambassador who was being taught by the instructor at the time. It was very fun. And last but not least, keychain making. Korea has many souvenir shops. We specifically went to a keychain making shop, which many Korean youth like to go to. Keychain making is still growing in its popularity, and it is an amazing gift for friends and family because it is a way to express yourself. Here, I have mine that I bought. It's also up there. I named her Lolita. You can go with your friends and family to make many fun memories as we did ourselves. And we even took photos with our keychains. Right here, this is the background that they had for us. And the two on the top are from other youth ambassadors, as well as this pink one on the bottom. And although leisure is a very good thing to escape from stress, we also do need time to reflect, which I would like to call up Christina to speak more about.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina and I will be a senior at Hunter College High School in the fall. As you now know, this spring we got to experience many different environments within Korea, but the experience that stayed with me personally didn't involve lights or crowds. It was quiet, remote, and intentional. We spent the night at Sonunsa, a Buddhist temple tucked away in the forests of Jeollabuk-do in the south. There we participated in a temple stay, an immersive retreat into monastic life. For 24 hours, we bowed 108 times, chanted before sunrise, walked in silence, and ate without speaking. It was challenging, but in that discomfort, I found something surprisingly peaceful and grounding. To understand temple stays, you first need to understand the roles temples play in Korean culture. For over 1,600 years, temples have been more than just religious sites. They are keepers of Korean art, philosophy, and history. Korean Buddhism emphasizes harmony with nature, humility, and self-discipline. That's why temples are often built deep in mountains or forests, places that feel separate from everyday life. And they aren't just spaces for monks. Temples have long been places where ordinary people come for reflection, ritual, or rest, especially during holidays like Buddha's birthday, which happen to fall around our stay. The temples themselves reflect traditional Korean aesthetics, simple wooden architecture with curved tile roofs nestled into natural landscapes. They're decorated with vivid danchong, colorful painted patterns, and you'll often see sacred guardians at the gates or lanterns hanging in celebration. The Temple Stay program was formalized in 2002, originally to introduce Korean Buddhism to foreign visitors during the World Cup. But today, it's embraced by Koreans of all ages who are looking for peace, purpose, or just a break from daily stress. Each temple stay varies slightly, but most include core practices like morning and evening chanting, Zen meditation, having meals in silence, walking meditation through the forest, and full adherence to monastic rules, which means bowing to monks, taking your shoes off, and staying quiet. You don't need to be Buddhist to participate. The point isn't conversion, it's connection. Through repetitive, humble routines, you reconnect with yourself, with nature, and with time. During our temple stay at Sonunsa, the temple was adorned with glowing paper lanterns. We arrived to a sea of color floating above our heads, each lantern carrying a prayer or a wish. The quiet joy reflected a spirit of the space, celebration through mindfulness. Temple culture in Korea isn't just about religion. It's part of a wider cultural response to stress and anxiety. Korea is a high-pressure society with fast-paced cities, intense education systems, and demanding jobs. As a result, many Koreans suffer from stress-related illnesses. In response, a healing culture has emerged. Cafes market themselves as healing spaces, hikes are called healing trails, but temple stays are one of the most oldest and profound versions of that healing. They provide structured refuge, a place to disconnect from noise and reconnect with purpose. Some programs are silent and meditative, others include tea ceremonies, calligraphy, or forest bathing. Monks speak of cultivating mindfulness in motion. Every act, whether it's walking, eating, or sweeping, is an opportunity for presence. That approach has deeply shaped how Korean temple life influences daily values like humility, collectivism, and respect for elders. One of the most meaningful parts of our temple stay was an unexpected conversation with a fellow guest, Dallas, a mental health professional from Hong Kong. He had come to Sonunsa alone, seeking a reset. He told us that he worked as a therapist in a city with high stress and a quick pace, not unlike New York City. The emotional toll had caught up with him. He said something that really stayed with me. I spent so much time listening to other people that I forgot how to listen to myself. Dallas wasn't there for religious reasons. He wasn't a monk, but he understood the value of the space. He came to reclaim his silence, to be in a place where he didn't have to fix anything, just exist and breathe and feel. His presence reminded me that temple stays aren't about tradition. They're about emotional survival in a noisy world. Even for someone trained to help others, stillness is necessary. In fact, it may be the most important form of self-care. Our temple stay only lasted about 24 hours, but it felt a lot longer than that, in a good way. We wore matching brown uniforms and followed a precise schedule. That evening, we joined the monks for evening chanting. rhythmic, resonant phrases. We then completed 108 prostrations. Each bow represents letting go of a specific ego, attachment, or fear. At first, I was focused on how hard it was physically, but somewhere in the middle, something shifted. It became meditative, a rhythm of peace. The next morning began at 4 a.m., with more chanting, followed by a silent breakfast. At Korean temples, food is considered fuel for practice, not a source of pleasure or indulgence. It's prepared with care, often foraged or grown on site, and it uses seasonal ingredients, and always plant-based. There's no meat, no dairy, and no eggs. It also excludes the 5 so-called pungent ingredients: onions, garlic, leeks, chives, and scallions, because they are believed to overstimulate the senses and interfere with meditation. Meals are simple but nourishing: rice, fermented vegetables, soup, and wild greens, just enough to sustain focus during long periods of meditation. We ended with walking meditation in the forest. In those woods, without phones, without conversation, I finally felt present. Not planning the next thing, not replaying the past. The temple stay didn't convert me to Buddhism. It didn't give me the answers to all life's problems, but it did teach me how much I crave stillness and how rarely I make room for it. 70% of South Korea is mountainous, which allows for many hermitages and temples to be built in isolation. Now my colleague Troyana will speak about the landscape. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Troyana, and I will be speaking about harmony with nature in Korea. Just open my things real quick. As Christina said, 70% of the land in South Korea is mountainous. This is a fact that comes up most often when discussing or first learning about the country, as often it is the land that shapes the people. Before our trip to Korea, we spent a lot of time learning about the history of Korea and trying to grasp a lot of the more intangible aspects of Korean culture and identity. One key topic we often circle back to was the idea of balance and harmony in the natural world. From their food to their flag, it seems as though Koreans were constantly living with nature and the preservation of nature in their mind. There are 5 traditional Korean colors: black, blue, red, white, and yellow. These colors represent the cardinal directions: north, east, south, west, and center. The seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. And the 5 elements: water, wood, fire, metal, and earth. What all these meanings have in common is that they the theme of nature or person's place within nature. Even when you look at the Korean flag, the 4 black trigrams on every corner of the flag represent something in nature and a balance between those 2 opposing but natural forces: heaven and earth, fire and water. There are 22 national parks in South Korea, 900 traditional Buddhist temples, and over 20,000 total Buddhist temples. Visiting these areas is a popular pastime in South Korea. Beyond just the rich cultural and historical ties that Korea has with Buddhism, people visit these temples and natural parks to reconnect with the present moment and ground themselves. During our trip to Peninsula Temple, we were able to go on a nature walk with one of the monks, and though the walk was pretty grueling for me personally, it left me truly enveloped in nature and grounding myself in the present moment rather than thinking about all the politics that we left back in the United States. While in Korea, we visited 2 companies who took the time to include some of their environmental initiatives in discussions with us. For example, Hyundai Motor Company shared how their company is looking towards a bright future for future generations. Therefore, they try to incorporate sustainable practices wherever possible. We spent a lot of time discussing hydrogen cars and buses that the companies envision will be the transportation of the future. Even the grounds where most of the operations of Hyundai Motor Company happened were very eco-friendly areas. In the West, we often view nature and innovation as 2 entirely different things and often sacrifice the beauty of nature in pursuit of record profits at the expense of the health and wellness of our population. The opposite is true in the case of as Hyundai Motor Company works towards complete eco-efficiency to protect the environment and the people working under them. Like Hyundai, POSCO also aims to achieve carbon neutrality in a sustainable supply chain, having multiple groups that work on different aspects of remaining environmentally friendly, that oversee each of their specific goals. During our tour of the Gyeongbokgung Palace in Seoul, the tour guide began to talk about the orientation in which the palace was constructed. She mentioned that the architects wanted to maximize auspiciousness, which in the English dictionary is only defined as being conducive to success. However, the way in which our tour guide described the meaning was much more in tune with nature than you might expect. She told us that the architects of the palace wanted there to be mountains, if the pointer works, be mountains in the back and a water in front. There's a bridge that's kind of obfuscated by the walls of the palace, and it wasn't filled with water when we got there, but like back when the palace was in operation, it would have been. Um, One of the other ambassadors in our group mentioned feng shui, to which our tour guide was surprised that they knew of the concept, and explained that the flow of energy was why such an orientation of the mountains, waters, and palace was considered auspicious. Um, the Pansori style of singing wasn't something we really learned about before or during our trip to Korea, but in creating these slides, Linda mentioned it to me, and I began researching. I learned that pan in Pansori means open space, and obviously Sori means sound, and that this name came from the style in which, or the way in which the style was practiced and created, as the singers would go out into nature and try to replicate the sounds they heard there, and then they brought it back to perform out in the street, in open courts, or on outdoor stages. Our next presentation will be done by Shane, where he'll be talking about collectivism in Korea.
Hi, my name is Shane Song Lewis. I recently graduated from Millennium High School and will be attending Pitzer College in Claremont, California in the fall. This presentation that I'll be doing is based on collectivism, going throughout what everyone was talking about, starting with school life. The school life in Korea, especially seen in Jeonbuk Foreign High School and Poonsong High School. Although we, sorry, although we didn't spend much time with the foreign language high schoolers, we were able to see that that they were very they were very familiar with each other, and the time that we spent with them was mainly in the classroom, which was playing games with them and understanding what they did both leisurely and during their school life. We had lunch with them, understanding that it wasn't as separated as we see in the West, but more in in their society that sorry in their society that it was that in their society it was more so togetherness. And then when we were with the Ponsong High School, we had stayed with them for, I want to say, 2 days. The first day we were with them for a whole day in their school. We played a lot of games with them, which also showed the togetherness. But then the next day we were in the village with them, which had also shown which was showing their own culture and their own collectivistic ideals. Going on to the differences between Western and Korean collectivism versus individualism, that in Western society we are seeing that it is more individual. We have more of an individualistic attitude, although our individualistic personality still holds true. We find ourselves doing things in the chance of being different than everyone else, rather than holding the same behavior and ideals, rather than in Korea. The Korean collectivism we've seen in school life is that they're seen together and none of them are truly excluded. We see this mainly in the lunchroom, where everyone is eating the same thing, sitting all together. It isn't much separation, but togetherness rather than. Then looking at the industry and workers, there's a lot of loyalty on both ends of the companies, employees, and customers themselves, because while the employees are so strongly loyal to the company because they adhere to everything, the company adheres to everything employees give us feedback. Same with as the customers do, which we see mainly with their products. We can see it that consumers will use mainly Hyundai and Kia in Korea as their vehicles, which shows their deeply rooted loyalty in collectivism and so on. Then speaking more so on leisure activities, referencing back to the high schoolers, we see that all the and food, restaurants, and so on, and all leisurely activities are meant to be more so together as if it was a family. I remember there was a few times when we were at the restaurants, it wasn't just single platters for each person. It was more so of a platter for like a whole type of family. And whenever we would sit together, it was as if we were sharing food with each other. And I think that shows the collectivistic ideas within leisure activity based on just food itself. But we see in the games that Harquin had presented, most of them have to be done with another person. It's hard to do just by yourself, showing again another collectivistic ideal. Moving on to the temple, as Christina was talking about, the temple itself is on a religious, but also personal collectivistic platform. We saw in the temple that we were meant to dress like, walk like, and not speak at times like everyone else, which spoke to the collectivistic ideals of Korean society. In lower tones in Western society, we might see as individualistic respect for each other. It's expected but in Korea, it's expected that you act a certain way for Koreans themselves, for each other, rather than just for yourself. Mainly in the temple where we eat, it's expected that you're completely silent and that you eat everything on your plate and clean your own dishes, showing collectivistic ecosystem within the lunchroom. Collectivistic ecosystem in the lunchroom, and speaking to the hard work of not only yourself in that ecosystem, but to the cooks in the ecosystem. Then speaking to Shayana's landscape point, a lot of the landscape is very much so free roam in a sense that you can see a lot of it. There aren't walls blocking anything. It's very easy to take pictures of everything. Although you will see in Korea that there will be signs saying don't go here and don't go there. And that's out of everyone's respect. Everyone understands collectively that you're not meant to go over that or push that boundary, rather than in Western society, if we just saw a sign, we might end up just going past it because it is just a sign. But in Korean society, we're meant to respect it. There's no walls, there's no need, because everyone understands and respects it. And then we see throughout Korean society and the collectivistic ideals throughout the entire time. But we see that a country that has been collectivistic for millennia, ended up splitting, not only for the country, but families as well. Moving on to the DMZ with Clarissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Clarissa Kunizaki. I'm going to be a senior at Brooklyn Technical High School in the fall. And today I'm going to be talking about reunification and just the divide between the two Koreas as we know today. And to begin, I'm going to start with a little bit of history. This is very oversimplified because I cannot cover everything, but just to give a little refresher for people who know or maybe don't know, Korea was split into North and South at the end of World War II at the 30th parallel. And so the Soviet Union was to oversee the North, while the United States was to oversee the South. And this divide was also one being like of communist rule versus capitalist rule. And so it's very important to know that Koreans were entirely excluded from this decision. And this is something that I think is very overlooked, but it's very important, especially when you consider, you know, for thousands of years, this being one country, and then underneath Japanese colonial rule, this sentiment only growing because they had been stripped of their autonomy and their independence. And so this was just another form of that continuation in a sense. And so moving on to the Korean War, in 1950, North Korea invaded the South in an effort to reunify the nation as one under communist rule. But after 3 years of intense fighting, the war ended in a stalemate that culminated in an armistice that was signed on July 27th, 1953, which halted the conflict but left Korea divided. And as Shane mentioned a little bit before, families were divided. This was very tragic, and it still continues to leave its mark on the Korean people and Korean history today. And something that's also important to note is that there was no formal peace treaty ever signed, and as such, the two Koreas are technically still at war. And so when we went to Korea, we kind of explored this topic firsthand through going to the DMZ and learning about unification and the demilitarized zone. So the DMZ is a term that's used to refer to the demilitarized zone, which was created after the Korean War when both North and South agreed to pull their military forces 1 mile back, creating a neutral space. And so it's 2 miles wide, and it spans from the West Sea, which is also known as the Yellow Sea, to the East Sea, which is also known as the Sea of Japan. And today, the DMZ is one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world, with armed guards, landmines, and constant surveillance. And it still serves as a hallmark of the divide, not just between the two Koreas, but also as a remnant of Cold War conflict and this lack of global peace entirely. And this is a photo of the JSA, or the Joint Security Agency, which up until a few years ago, people could visit if they were touring it. But I'll talk a little bit after that in a second. But, you know, the DMZ today is still considered one of the most dangerous borders in the world. And up until recently, it was considered the most dangerous. And so just to talk a little bit more about our DMZ visit, we visited the DMZ on our last day in South Korea, and it was really great. But to begin, we visited the DMZ, and at the Welcome Center, which we first went to, there's a video that plays that gives you an overview of the history of the divide. And as Project Bridge, we actually got a special look because the screen, after the video plays, the screen goes up, and then there's a small museum in the back. And so we got special exclusive access to this museum by a South Korean soldier who spoke English. So it was very informative. And the photo here is a different soldier explaining to us the history of the third infiltration tunnel, or just the third tunnel, which was discovered in 1978, that North Korean forces were trying to dig up to hopefully infiltrate this out. Yeah. And then the next slide is another part of our DMZ visit. And continuing on the line of the third tunnel, we actually had a chance to go in the third tunnel. It was really steep. I was not expecting it to be that steep, but part of it is barricaded off. You can only go so far. But yeah, oh my goodness, it's so steep. And it was both mentally and physically very taxing. I've never done anything like it. And many of our friends, I remember we kind of had to like squat to go through, and many of our friends kept bumping their head on the wall. So it's good that we had helmets. And this photo is one of our friends in the middle. His name is Abdul. And there's like this photo op diorama thing with two fake South Korean soldiers. That's like a commemoration of the third infiltration tunnel being discovered. And another thing I want to note is that there was a gift shop. I did go to the gift shop. Many of us went to the gift shop. And I actually got very interesting North Korean and unification commemoration mailing stamps, which pictured Korean nature and other very like interesting political imagery. So yeah, it was very neat. To go to the next slide, as I kind of mentioned before, in the past, visitors were allowed to do things like visit the JSA, but on our DMZ visit, we kind of experienced more so like a time and place where tensions are very high. And so, for instance, when we went, we were not allowed to take photos of the North. When you go in, there's like this big building, and there are like these massive windows where you're usually allowed to take photos, but we were not. And so the photos here are photos taken of the North and the South by past Project Bridge youth ambassadors that Linda sent me. But this is essentially what we saw. There wasn't as much like yellow dust when we went, but that's something that's also a big issue there. And we were also prohibited from visiting like the open observatory deck on the 3rd floor due to recent issues with garbage balloons, which is not great. It's pretty bad, obviously. And additionally, we also heard K-pop out on South Korea's loudspeakers, which are immediately outside of this structure. And this is part of the broader Korean loudspeaker war, where both North and South loudspeakers will play various forms of propaganda, whether that be music or news announcing, development and other good news, and trying to convince the other side that they're better. And so another part of our DMZ visit was talking to a South Korean soldier. And this was different than, I think, like more surface level conversations, because the soldier we talked to was very open and honest about, not just the DMZ, but also his life. We really asked him a lot of questions, and he was very, very gracious and definitely very open. So from him, we learned more in depth about things like the mandatory military service, the Korean education system, and more. And as you can see, this is a photo we took with him. I had to block him out for his security. But this is a few of us, and there were many other ones we took, but we couldn't include them, obviously, for privacy. But like, for instance, many of us took photos of him with peace signs and like with other silly poses. But yeah, he was great. And I just wanted to point him out because he really did exceed the standard of just being a tour guide. And, he was so nice, especially to us. I remember this one other couple was asking him for photos, and he like did not want to. So yeah, shout out to him. He was great. And then immediately after we went to the DMZ, we went to the Center for a Unified Korean Future. This is a recent initiative out of the National Institute of Unification Education in Seoul, which is more of like a research and postdoc facility. And this place was created specifically for Korean youth to introduce them and educate them on what a unified Korean future can look like, and also the history of the conflict with the DMZ and Korea being divided. And something that I found was really interesting is that the center wasn't just about educating based on like textbooky things or what you traditionally think about when going to a museum. It was really about engaging students with this idea in very interactive ways, which I'll cover in a second. But it has a very symbolic place physically. It's located directly on like where the original North-South divide was. It's located very close to the 38th parallel. It's also at the confluence of the Imjin River and the Hantan River, which are the rivers that start from the north and flow into the south. And something that I did not put on the slide, but I wanted to mention, is that I remember Professor Kim, who I'll talk a little bit more about, he was saying that at night you can hear North Korean soldiers training because it's so close to North Korea. And he said like you can hear shots being fired and things like that. And I remember being very freaked out about that. But they also do like overnight visits for students, and that's something that they did mention. So yeah. This is something we experienced. This was the virtual reality train experience. I put some photos of us. You have Damien from Montana, McKenna from Montana, and then Yadel from Los Angeles. And then over here you have Logan from Los Angeles and also Abdul from Los Angeles. And so we partook in different interactive activities, like I said before, and this was the first one that we went through as a group. And so this simulation took us through the history of the divide and visually showed us what it would be like for families to reunify, and also just showing Korean landscape in a very immersive way. And I think that throughout the trip, like we really did have a chance to see Korea, something that we spent a lot of time on. Although it was not a train, we spent a lot of time on the bus. And it just kind of reminded me of this because it was really about immersing yourself and looking across Korean nature and history. And yeah, next slide. This is a little bit silly, but there was also a photo booth there, which was one of my favorite activities, as you can tell. But this was an activity where like the photo booth, there was a green screen, and it would be used to display ourselves in future tourist sites that would not be accessible like if North and South were still divided. So I remember like some of these places are in North Korea, or like I said before, would not be accessible given the current divide, but what could be potentially there in the future. And so yeah, these are a few of my friends and I. Some of them already presented. But in the center on the right, Michela, miss you very much. And then we also have other friends. Yeah. So there were also other activities which I really quickly want to go over. There was an interactive teleprompter and driving simulation. On the top right, it's kind of hard to see, but this is like the teleprompter machine, and essentially, there would be like a place for you to pretend to be like a news reporter and announcing positive future news that would happen, like if the Koreas were unified. So for instance, I remember it was like, oh, you're a teleprompter or you're a news reporter and you're talking about this Olympic win if the Koreas were just one team and not separate ones. And there was also like the driving simulation, which similar to the photo booth, it has like driving sites that you'd be able to access if North Korea was accessible and if the Koreas were unified. There was also a very interesting rhythm game that I did not have a chance to play. If you guys are familiar, they're like apps. They're like game apps where you have to press the keys, the piano keys. It's kind of like that. I did not get a chance to play because the line was really long, but it had like traditional Korean music. And then there was also a very nice outside park and leisure area, which are the photos on the left. And it was not just like a space to talk with friends, but also a space to connect and reflect on what we had been learning. And it was very lovely and overall very beautiful space. And then the next thing is kind of serious, but another part of the program was having the chance to speak with the North Korean defector. And we can't put photos of him here because of his safety, because he defected a few years ago, and that would like put him and his family at risk because his family is still in North Korea, and that's something we talked about. And, you know, I kind of touched upon how we had a lot of fun with the other experiences here at the Center for Unified Korean Future, but I think that this was definitely the most moving part of this specific experience, if not the entire trip for many of us. And specifically, he kind of shared with us his life story. And while we cannot share a lot of specifics, I'll just talk a little bit about the points that I thought were very interesting. So we learned a lot about his life growing up in North Korea and how, for instance, he was not able to access the level of education he wanted to because his family was not wealthy, and how his escape story specifically was that he was serving in mandatory North Korean military service in a foreign country doing very hard physical labor. And the specific point that I remember very clearly is that he would work every single day from 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. doing this like very grueling work. And eventually he escaped and went to the South Korean embassy in this said foreign country. And he actually had to fight off 17 North Korean soldiers to be able to enter into the embassy. And at first when he said this, he didn't mention the fact he also had to get the help of several South Korean like MPs who were stationed there. But had he not gotten that help, he would have not been in the position he is today talking to us. And I think that oftentimes when we think about North Korea, South Korea, or even just North Korea as a whole, it can be very hard to, in a sense, like humanize this issue. And I think that for me, from growing up seeing issues, you know, like with nuclear proliferation and, you know, issues relating to that and how North Korea is perceived and how North Korean people are perceived even to an extent, this was very impactful. And I think it just goes to show that having opportunities like this to really engage with people on this level, not just on, you know, a very wide perspective, but really intimately, was very important. And we also had a chance to have Q&A with him that I really enjoyed. I remember Shane and I asked him a lot about religion and also him practicing the resilience of, you know, shifting into South Korean culture. And overall, it was a very once in a lifetime opportunity. And we got a very intimate insight into the realities of this divide that can often overlook the humans within them. And so moving on to that, the next part of our trip immediately after that was having a walking lecture with Professor Kim, which was very insightful. So in the photos here on the left, you can see this is like the original signage from the Korean War of the Divide. And the middle part is the 30th parallel. And then on the other side, you have him talking with us. The person speaking there is M from Montana. And so I'd just like to point out that the talk with the North Korean defector was also moderated by Professor Kim, who works at the National Institute of Unification Education in Seoul. And so Throughout this walk, Professor Kim talked more to us about Korean history leading up to the divide and beyond, and even looking towards the future. And he really did encourage us to discuss our own thoughts on what steps are needed to reunify Korea. And the entire walk was very participatory, and I would say engaging in a level that is not very common. And it wasn't just him speaking to us, it was him asking us for our thoughts and asking us to make connections to our own life and working towards a better future for all. And then the next photo, I think you saw like the same exact one in the beginning, but this is us standing over the original North-South divide, and we're all holding up like which we did a lot in Korea because it's a thing, and so here's a photo of our entire cohort standing on both the north and south side of the original divide. And I think that even though this is like a very heavy topic, something that I think this photo shows is that we were really able to engage with it on a very like impactful level and a way that was very valuable to many of us. And so the next photo is a clearer photo of Professor Kim, myself, and also Shane. And I also want to point out that Shane is wearing a varsity jacket from Ewha Women's University. I also got a matching one, but yeah, many of us did. And you may have been wondering what like this piece of wall is in the back. It's kind of shown here, and it's more clearly shown here, and I think it segues very nicely into the end of my presentation. But here, this is specifically one of two pieces of the Berlin Wall that is located at the Reunification Center. And so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. For some reason, Abdul is in many of these photos, but Abdul is seen here on the left, but those are better photos of the two pieces of the Berlin Wall. And so I think that these two pieces were gifted by the German people, and I think that them being here is very symbolic of what this center and what reunification really means, because even though the Berlin Wall was something that many of us believed would never be taken down, and that, you know, a future where Germany would not be divided was impossible, eventually people took up like literal hammers and went to action and struck it down themselves. And I think that even though we were very short on time, Professor Kim left us with this idea that there is hope for unification, but that this process cannot be done without global cooperation and awareness. And specifically, us as Americans in the United States as a whole, we play a very big role in this goal, whether we like it or not, for reunification, because we were signatories of the original armistice. And like I mentioned before, Korea was not involved in this process, and so it is also part of our American duty and our responsibility as global citizens to continue working with the Korean people and educating ourselves on this topic. And so even though I think that the Berlin Wall posed this sort of monumental obstacle that many of us, like I said before, never believed would come down, it also goes to show that like many of these sentiments are shared with current views on the DMZ, and that like the Berlin Wall, the DMZ can also one day come down if we all work towards it. And I also just want to leave this presentation off on a quote that I read online from an article called Korea, Comfortable Peace, Uncomfortable Peace, Comfortable Wall, Uncomfortable Peace, sorry, by Amelia S. Heo. When I was doing initial research about the DMZ previous to us visiting in preparation for our study tour, but the quote is, "Working for peace is uncomfortable. It requires us to constantly stay inside the world of discord, not to run away from it, but to continue searching for answers even when the situation seems forlorn. Making the wall uncomfortable and peace comfortable depends on whether we are willing to commit to the laborious process of constructing peace and overcoming past divisions. The Korean Wall, therefore, is profoundly paradoxical, as it both constitutes a daunting obstacle to peace, but also a tangible remnant encouraging us to take our individual role for peace seriously." And on a final note, even though the DMZ does symbolize this really great obstacle and divide, not just between the Korean people, but world peace as a whole, it's also a place where hope and collective action is needed to push for world peace. And, Project Bridge, we are part of that future, and we want to continue contributing to that both now and in the future. So, thank you. And I'm also going to be moderating the Q&A. So, yeah. Oh, and by the way, we have a virtual audience. So if you do ask a question, which hopefully many of you will, you're going to be given a microphone, and it's very important that you not just introduce yourself if you're comfortable, but also speak very clearly so the virtual audience can also hear. Yeah.
So if you can just raise your hand, we have a mic again because of the virtual audience. Just say your name and who you're related to or your affiliation or whatever. And also feel free to ask anyone any questions. You can ask me a question. You can ask Dr. Perez a question, and even maybe if there's a question for former alumnus of the program or alumni of the program. But any questions? Do we have any questions coming in virtually? No?
Wait, Linda.
Okay, we do. Okay, let me get this mic over to you.
Linda, should we sit on the stage, or it's okay?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Sounds good.
Hello, my name is France, and I am an alum from Project Bridge. For those of you who are entering college, how has Project Bridge shaped your possible major, possible trajectory that you take in college?
Do any of the seniors want to answer?
Or for juniors, colleges you may consider. And Frances, by the way, France, you should speak to. She's a recent graduate of Claremont McKenna. This June, May.
I think the study tour itself didn't change anything about my major, but it more so because I want to major in politics and philosophy and so on, but I think it more so reconfirmed to me why I want to do it, and that it's more so an international thing to me rather than just the US, that it has something to do with more than just the West or the global South and how everything is different. But I don't know. I think the intersectionality of it just, it helped me see the different perspective. And now I kind of want to do that everywhere else.
I think that Layla wants to speak too.
Testing.
Hi, my name is Layla. As I said earlier, I'd be attending the University of Pennsylvania in the fall. I think this program really helped to gauge my interest and also how I want to navigate college in the future. Even if I don't want to do politics or international relations in college, it definitely made me realize that I do want to do more cultural understanding, in which I do plan to take up a language while in college, but not only that, to do more study abroad. This program is not my first time doing study abroad. I have done it before with CIEE, High School Summer Abroad, and the Yucatan Peninsula and Mexico for language and culture. But this program also helped to redefine my goals and ambitions to do more study abroad, to continue enhancing cultural understanding and cross-cultural connections with other people, because you could just learn so much from those experiences and learn so much from not only people that you go on these trips with, but also from the people in those cultures and the people who experience things firsthand, whether they be similar experiences or very different ones.
So we have a question here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Carandang. I'm currently a rising senior at Baruch College studying accounting, and I was a Project Bridge Youth Ambassador from 2021 to 2022. And first, I just want to say congratulations to all of you on going through the program and being here today. But my question for you guys is, out of curiosity, I'm wondering at this point how you take the lessons you've learned from your study tour and act on them in your daily lives.
Actually, and if you can stand and let people see you.
Stand up here.
Or you can all go up there because if you want to, that's probably easier than they can. We can all stare at you till once some of you answer. How's that? So, thank you, Clarissa, for
Yes.
Is this on? Yes. Okay. For me personally, what really impacted me was actually the workshops, because that's where we learn most. That's that's where we learn most of how we navigate through many things. And I would say the lessons that I would take after today and after everything we've done so far in this program is pretty much how I interact with other cultures and people that I have never met before or haven't necessarily interacted with. Even though New York City is very diverse, I would say I've pretty much stuck to my culture specifically. So I would say it's really eye opener. And I would say in the future, instead of just thinking, oh, why is this person like acting this way? That's kind of bad. It's more of thinking, oh, why? Like, is it because of their culture? Is there a specific way? Is what they're doing disrespectful, or is it actually respectful towards me? So I would say that's pretty much how I think about it.
Anyone else?
How will you take the lessons from?
Like, how do we apply it to our own life?
And apply it to your life, yeah.
I guess I'll answer as well. I guess for me, it would just be like, because from the workshops and also being there, just to like always keep an open mind, to always remain respectful, to always keep an open mind, and to always remain respectful in different situations, and to never like judge a book by its color, like, you know, a very famous saying is, because we learn to not like stereotype people or to put people in one box. So I think that's an important lesson to take away from this program, and just as you navigate life.
Next question.
And while we're waiting for the next question, it really makes me very happy to hear them say that, because when we talked about intercultural competence skills, that was one of the areas that we worked in, and with all the different more recent alumni that are here, to like really have that ability to step back. We tend to make immediate judgments based on what we know, but that idea that look at a situation and don't make a prejudgment, don't make an immediate judgment, don't fall for the stereotype, but to learn what I think is a life skill that you work on your entire life, which is to step back and observe. And as they learned, it's perceptual acuity, to look deeper to see what are maybe some other explanations. So it makes me very happy to hear you reflect on that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to present for us. My name is William Chung. I'm a social studies teacher at Brooklyn Technical High School. It's awesome that you've done Project Bridge. I wish all our students could do Project Bridge. So I wanted to ask you as a teacher, how might you add to the curriculum at your school or change aspects of your curriculum so that it speaks more to international relations, global cooperation, or how we might get young people to change the world and be ambassadors for us, you know, as you have all done.
Over here. Hi. That's a great question. I think that one way you can incorporate it into, I know a lot of schools have things such as advisory or maybe a CD program, cerebral diversity, things like that. And it's programs where you can connect with other people, learn about a wide range of topics outside of the 4 core: social studies, science, math, English. And I think that a lot of what we learned about perceptual acuity, emotional resilience, how to understand a culture and how to understand people, I think that that can be included in that a lot. We learned about, if anyone can, I remember emotional resilience and perceptual acuity are 2 of the 4. Anyone else remember the other 2?
Emotional resilience.
Okay. Well, 2 of 4 aspects that you need to consider about yourself before studying abroad, entering another country. But I think that it's 2 of 4 aspects that you should consider about yourself overall before entering any new situation. It's a way to think about how to understand what you're going into and how to understand how to prepare yourself for what you're going into. So I think that if there are any like schools with like electives and things like that, that can be included into programs like that.
Do you want to go first? Do you want to speak here?
Is it on? Oh, no, it's working. I want to go back where I was. Well, in New York City specifically, we're lucky to have like a lot of hotspots of different culture, and I feel like getting the students out of the classroom is a really great way to get them to think about the wider world around them and the world they're going to step into after they graduate from the high schools. And personally, in my school, those kids are they're very clicky, and I think like getting them out of like their comfort zones, forcing them to interact with other kids in the school, like we don't get to assign the groups, and just taking them to different cultural hotbeds in the city. You know, like Washington Heights, there are some areas in Flushing, Queens, where there's a very large Chinese population, and just having them like talk with people, and like specifically maybe you can reach out to those specific areas and like get them to maybe share more about like their journey here if they're immigrants, or like their culture and like how what's important to them.
I can speak, I'll just speak. Just that mic. Adding on to that, I think that like when we think about history and stuff, we kind of see it as only like remaining in social studies or even English. And I think that for me, something that not necessarily surprised me, but something I really enjoyed on this trip was going to the museums in like companies like POSCO and also Hyundai, and like I guess thinking more about how STEM education, even in and of itself, is like not neutral, and how there are like deep histories within STEM. And I just think that being able to integrate more history within not just English and humanities or even things like advisory, but integrating it within every single subject would be very powerful. And having kids be able to make more of these connections, and kind of piggybacking off of what Troyana said, like I think we all have family histories that should be more embraced and talked about within schools. And even though I'm not Korean American, like a big reason why I've been really interested in Korean and Korean American history is because of my 4th grade teacher, Miss Kim, who may be watching this online. But I remember when I was in her 4th grade class, we learned about Korean folk tales, and also we played gongi and things like that. And even having that space of cultural learning was very enriching for me. And a lot of us are like very interconnected with these histories, and even if it's like Dr. Perez said, like even if it's not necessarily we have a personal connection to these histories, we can draw both similarities and differences between them. So I just think that there are many issues within history curriculum in general, but I just think expanding our view on what history can constitute and really having engaging participation within it would be very impactful. Yeah. Okay, next question. Oh, Shane.
Yeah. I think so everyone's points about history and advisory and so on are great and should be expanded, but I think it's really about the fundamental values that we learned should be taught within classes. I think coming from high school, empathy is a thing that does develop throughout the 4 years but isn't really taught. I think that when we went to Korea and we had this idea that things are different and you should understand that it's not targeted towards you, but it's just a thing that's happening. I think that ideal or idea is something just not taught or not considered in classrooms at all. So it more so happens where people in classrooms will feel like they're targeted rather than understanding the different culture or having that mindset that things might be different in that household or that culture or and so on, So yeah.
Another question.
Hi, hello. Again, thank you for presenting. I'm Yan. I'm a rising junior at Princeton University, and I'm a friend of Clarissa's. I guess my question is, you spent, this immersive kind of more than a week in Korea. So what are some aspects of Korean culture you wish to see more in the US or in New York specifically? Whether it's photo booths or better food?
Oh, Natalie, do you want to answer this? Yeah. All of them, sorry. Do you want to answer? Wait, does anyone answer?
Okay, to answer that question, I think an aspect of Korean culture that I would prefer to see in the United States, everything's just so orderly over there. I'm sorry, but like you look, we didn't get a chance to take the metro, but I've seen the metro stations tend to be a lot cleaner, and everybody tends to there's a larger respect for elders, and the Korean students were a lot better at listening to teachers than I've seen a lot of American students are. But to your point, the idea of photo booths, that I did find those really cute. I would like to see those more in the United States, I guess. But I think they really speak to a different kind of leisure culture in Korea that Harquin spoke to, that I found really intriguing. But I do think there are aspects of American culture and Korean culture that really are they're different, but neither one is necessarily better than the other. So.
Okay, so for me, I would say like the food markets, like the street food markets. I know that they have that here, but they're very like a few times a year or something like that. But like in Korea, obviously you see like it's easy to access like every day, every week. And I know that especially here in New York City, there's a lot of small businesses, and food street markets like that are like very like helpful for those businesses to like build clientele, make more customers, make more money. And for specifically me, like my grandma, she's like one of those little icy ladies, like the one. So like I just know that would be very helpful for her, especially since she's already getting older, and like she's like she goes all around the city like looking like for places to sell. So like just stuff like that will make it easier for small businesses and stuff like that is just something I think would be better, or like would be very like nice here in like the US.
For me personally, I also wanted to touch upon food, but in terms of school, because I hear a lot of complaints from like siblings or other students, oh, this food does not taste good, which I do disagree on. I just feel it depends from school to school, I would say, but we usually get around the same things. But in terms of the school food in Korea, it's more balanced and nutritional. And they also, I believe in the schools that we went to specifically, they had actual ladies in the back who were actually cooking for them. And that I feel like a lot of the students would prefer a bit better food in the cafeteria. And touching upon that, I would also like to say like the wastefulness. I didn't really notice it as much as when living here, but when we went on the study tour, there was a lot of make sure to eat all your food. Don't take too much. If anything, you can come back and get seconds, because they take a lot of pride into making their food. So I feel that we could be a little less wasteful,
I think that one thing I noticed is the courtesy and respect for surroundings that is shown all throughout Korea. One of the first things that I noticed, and I talked about this with Shane, as soon as we got to Korea, as soon as we were in the airport, it was the silence that was there. It was incredible. We were in an airport and it was very busy. We could see all the people, but we could also like hear each other talking like very clearly. It was not anybody yelling or running around or making a big scene or anything like that. And everyone was being very respectful to their surroundings and the other people that were there. And that was something we noticed coming back. Is we were in the airport in Korea, in Seoul, and as soon as we touched down in LaGuardia, we were in the customs line, and it was just constant noise. And so I think that the courtesy and respect for that that the Korean people have for their surroundings is something that would definitely be beneficial.
I think my answer is kind of a bit controversial, but I think what we should take back is like the atheism in South Korea. I know majority of the population is atheist, and here in America, although there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, there very much isn't. You can tell that with the current administration, and I feel as though if more of the population weren't so like hard stuck in their Christian fundamentalist beliefs, that we could progress more as a society and be more inclusive of like all of the combining cultures that come to America to thrive and flourish.
For me, I feel like it has to be like the cleanliness, like in their school environments, just like the respect to like be clean, and also like their initiatives to like care about the environment and care about their surroundings. Like I know in my middle school I went to, we were like told to like clean up after ourselves, like sweep the floors if we made a mess, wipe down the tables if we made a mess. But I feel like that's not something like widespread in a lot of areas or in a lot of schools and a lot of environments. So like I think that's one thing that I take back, like the respect for the environment and cleanliness.
I'll go lastly for this one. But I think that when we were visiting the different South Korean companies, even though like we may be getting a very like specific point of view within these like presentations and what we're learning. I thought it was very admirable how like a lot of these companies did really care about their workers like to a degree. So for instance, one company we visited, they talked a lot about how they always make sure that they pay the tuition for their workers as children, and I thought that was nice. Yeah.
I thought I didn't have something to say, but honestly, I think bringing something back to the U.S., which kind of is impossible now, I preferred the nature over in Korea a lot. It was very expansive. The landscape was beautiful. I love the fact that it was respected the entire time. That there was no need for walls, like I was saying. But I think right now, like just in New York specifically, I wish there was a lot more land that we could, just live on. Honestly, yeah.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Brian Pantacook. My son is Tyler. I would love to hear about your temple stay experiences and specifically whether you have brought some of that slowness back into your present life here and what that looks like, because we live very fast lives with our phones and traveling and all that stuff. I'd love to hear about that.
Personally, I think it's quite ironic. I feel like in the temple stay for me, it kind of gave me a religious perspective on my own religion, which I think it's ironic because it wasn't Buddhism. It just helped me understand God myself more, and the quietness kind of helped me understand myself even more. But also, I think what really happened here in America, what I've been trying to do is separate myself from my phone and bring this quietness by like using other devices, like only one use devices. Like we could think about like a 3DS or an iPod or any old device to kind of like bring back and not put myself on this attention of social media or just my phone all the time. So yeah.
I think I've taken back the ability to step outside myself. I'm always in my head a lot, and being in the temple, you really just connect with nature in a way that was able to like get me out of my head and worrying about politics in the United States and like our future, just being present in the moment.
I kind of had a almost opposite reaction to Troyana. Well, the idea of being in your head, like I feel like I've taken more time to reflect on like myself in general, just like to be quiet and like to observe your surroundings more. That's something that I really took with me. One of the things that we actually had a tea talk with one of the monks that was at the temple, where we tried the tea that they grow locally, and we actually saw the tea growing. And so she mentioned the idea of like mindfulness, as I was saying in my presentation, and you kind of like observe the tea as it's like going down your throat, and that sounds kind of gross, but it's the idea of like being mindful of all your actions, and even something simple as like drinking tea or eating can be turned into like something for reflection, and you're not focusing on anything else. You're just living in the moment. You're just drinking tea, and you're relaxing, and you're letting the emotions pass through you, and you're not settling on any one thing for too long, which really lets your mind go free.
So for me, like coming back, from like the walk we did especially, it reminded me that I need to like do that more, like go out into nature and just like be one with nature in a sense. It was like a very long mile walk, and some of us did it in our business shoes. But definitely coming back from that nature walk and just from everything at the temple, it just reminded me to like make sure I also think about myself and not so much. And like while I like to help other people and be present and a reliable source for other people, just to be present in myself, remind to take care of myself, and just to like remind myself that even in a world where things might not be perfect, there's something still out there and there's more for me to do, but there's also time for me to reflect.
I think it's interesting for me because part of my family is very Buddhist, and going in like for some reason, I don't know. I think that when I first went in, I had this expectation of Buddhism being very like not necessarily far removed from reality, but very like, oh, like I'm just gonna focus on myself and like be very meditative. And I think that for me, something that was very surprising was how kind of integrated many of the monks were in like the modern world. I remember I was looking at one of our like monks' phones because she had it out and she had like had ChatGPT on her phone. And I asked her, I was like, "Oh, you have ChatGPT?" And she was like, "Yeah, why would I not?" And I don't know, it just made me think more about how the world is like becoming more increasingly connected, and that like we kind of still need moments where we can center like interconnectedness and humanity like within that. Because I feel like even though the temple, it was a lot about yourself and focusing on yourself and learning how to practice inner peace by yourself. I feel like I found a lot of peace with my peers and being able to talk to them and even being able to talk with the monks. And like another thing I did want to talk about was during the silent dinners or the silent meals. That was like very difficult for me because I laugh a lot, even now, and I talk a lot. And I remember we were eating and Tyler had like, okay, so really quickly, part of like the meal experience is that you have like this lineup when you go in and then you grab your food. And at the beginning, actually, there are like these two packaged kind of like desserts. So one is like a rice cake and then the other one is kind of like another kind of rice cake. And so Tyler, he like needed help opening his package. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is so easy. And I remember I opened it and then like the powder went everywhere and I just had to like cover my mouth. And I remember trying so hard not to laugh. That was just a random antidote. But I think to answer your question, for me, like many of us, the temple kind of made me think more about like my own positionality and my own spirituality and learning to also like lean on other people to find these moments of peace and like move forward in the world.
I agree with a lot of what they said, but I do want to say that for me, silence is kind of weird. Like it's kind of awkward. I come from a really loud family. I myself am also really loud. I laugh loud as well. But even like our society here in New York is very fast paced, as you said as well. So just being like at the temple, you're able to slow down and not hear so much noise. You're not as much overwhelmed, and it felt very weird. But I would say I did really like it a lot. And honestly, with all the silence, like I think my mind kind of tried to create noise. And I don't know, it was like a kind of weird experience. And I do wish that I had enough time here. As I said, it's very fast paced. I wish I do had enough time here to be able to make silence for myself and kind of debrief of all the feelings that we've had. I remember one of the nuns over there, she did say that once you enter the temple, leave all the evil, the bad feelings behind. Don't think about the past. Don't think about what's going to happen in the future. Try to live in the present. So I would say that's something that I do wish to continue bringing on in my life.
Kind of similar to what Christina said, but when we were with the monk, we were doing the tea meditation. She talked a lot about meditating and how to meditate and how there's a little bit of a stereotypical view on how to meditate. And one of those views is that you kind of sit in like a crisscross position and you have your hands out and you kind of make the om sound. And she talked about the om sound is, they don't really, when she's meditating, she does not make the om sound. It's more popular in Tibetan monk culture because it's believed to be the first sound in the universe. But meditating doesn't have to be the very still om, kind of reflecting with that. Kind of like similar to what Christina said, you can meditate in whatever you're doing as long as you're putting meaningful thought into it and you're connecting with what you're doing more than just, I'm doing it, it's mindless. You're thinking about it, you're consciously thinking about it, you're thinking about how you're doing it, and that can kind of center you and make you feel more comfortable with whatever you're doing.
One more thing to say.
Oh, okay.
Troyana, really quick.
But because everyone's giving an anecdote, I remember the nun, she also said that like when you meditate, you aren't like trying to like have a completely empty mind. And that's what I had thought meditating was like the entire time like I heard of the word. And she like, it wasn't really funny, but when she said, if you could clear your mind, like you'll be Buddha, you have no reason to be here. I bursted out laughing so bad.
I just wanted to say, So for those of you who have gone since COVID, I can't speak to before COVID, but as you know, we had a delightful female monk who would talk with us, but she didn't speak English. The monk we had this time had just recently returned, I think, from Maryland, 4 years in Maryland, but I think she'd been a total of 9 years in the U.S. And so she was actually very, very good at being able to talk with U.S. Americans, and in terms of understanding, really understanding their, where they're coming from. So I think you were very, very lucky in that way, where she could really tap into where you were and put it in a manner that was understandable. And her English was like native, she was actually quite fluent. But we also learned things there. So not all as tension-free as we would think. And so the monk had us ringing the bell, as probably most of you did. And there was a male monk who came flying out. I don't think I'm exaggerating, yelling that, no, you can't ring the bell now. This is not the time to ring the bell. And she clearly had been in the U.S. for a while, because she did not stand down. She actually got on her phone and called someone who I think talked to the male monk and said, no, absolutely, they can ring the bell, and we were able to continue. But we did realize another difference from those of you who since post-COVID went, as you knew that when we were in the cafeteria, we always ate, or for a part of the time, we sat on one side of the hall, right? And the monks, the male monks, sat on the other side of the hall. And even though we were trying to be as silent as we could be, they thought we were loud. So whether we were loud or, well, sometimes we were. We just moved chairs. We find it really, really hard not to try to communicate, even if we're not talking. But this year, and it was the first year in my experience that I had seen it, is that the male monks no longer eat with the visitors. So there is, it was interesting to see because, you're peaceful, you're all of this. But I do want to share that because it was something that we witnessed, and we're really pretty surprised by it.
Also, we had the Buddhist television network filming us, which is really interesting.
That was another thing that I think probably got the monks said, no, they're ringing the bell. There were, and it was very non-intrusive, but the Buddhist television station had heard we were coming and wanted to know if they could film a bit. And really, they were, most of the time, I didn't even know they were around. So I think unless there's another pressing question, there is? Okay, go ahead. One more question, because we know the dinner is back there.
Hi, I'm Nara. I'm a classmate of and I'm dating Tyler. Congratulations on all of your presentations. They were delightful. I wanted to ask about your experience on specifically the study tour. I don't know if any of you have traveled internationally like this, but being so far away from home and then in comparison to a family trip or a school trip somewhere.
So I would like to preface, this is my third time being away and traveling internationally without my family. This is my second time doing a cultural type of program. What made this one different, because like I said earlier, I had done CIEE, high school summer study abroad in Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and that was a more language and cultural immersion program. Unlike this program, which was more of a study tour. I would say one of the big similarities from both of those programs was meeting high school students and doing a cross-cultural exchange. What made them very different, though, however, is in the language and culture one, we were focusing on enhancing our language skills, that being Spanish, and also connecting with locals, asking locals about their life. Whereas in the study tour, we talked with various different professionals, various people who were connected with like the Korean society and the program itself. And we didn't just learn about the Korean culture and Korean life, but also how Korean connects to the U.S. and connects as a global powerhouse in a sense, and how Korea not only has a very strong not only the differences between Korean and American culture, but just like in life as a whole, what Korea is about, and how Korea connects globally?
For me, that was my first time ever being away from my family, like, at all. I've been with my family every single day. It isn't like I have never been away from my mom ever in my life, and this was my first time, and it's 12 days essentially. So I would say, although there are many good aspects to that, for me it was a lot of catching myself really, like, being very nervous. Like, usually you would be like really okay, like, oh, I'm gonna eat this food. For me it was like, I'm feeling kind of strange. Like, I couldn't eat the food as much as I would have wanted to, which was kind of sad because they gave us a lot of food and I didn't want to, like, seem like a really wasteful, like, American. But also I found myself going to, like, to isolate myself specifically. Like, I found myself zoning out a few times, but then also going to the bathroom to, like, debrief. And I noticed that I haven't really stepped out of my comfort zone as much as I would have hoped when I was, like, at home or here, like, comfortable with the people that I know. It's a lot of socializing. You wake up, you're socializing with the person that you're sleeping with. You go to sleep, you say goodnight to the person you're sleeping with. So it was very outside of my comfort zone. I've never experienced anything like this. So I would say, going on from now, I do want to step out of my comfort zone no matter how nervous I am. So that way I am, how do I say it? Like, that way I do know what the feeling is and I'm able to overcome that in future situations.
I've been outside the country before this trip, and I've been outside the continent. Last year I went to Europe with my family, but every trip I've ever taken far like this was with my family. And so before the trip, I was a little nervous because even though we'd done so many workshops together, I still felt like I didn't really know the people standing on the stage with me. And so going on the trip, I felt a little uncomfortable because with family trips, you know, you can kind of, you're with your family, you know these people, you know them your whole life. But I had met these people only a few months before, and I still felt like I didn't really know them. But luckily on the trip, I really felt like I really got to know them, and I felt like they became a part of my family, especially on the trip. I mean, sleeping in the same room together, obviously that pushes you very close, and being on the bus together, that makes you very close. But there was a lot of leisure time. Despite how packed our schedule was, there was a lot of time when you could have chosen to interact with people or to not. And I think that all of us found ourselves eventually interacting with everyone far more than we ever expected to, because we got very close. And so I think that everyone, even though initially I felt a little uncomfortable because I wasn't with my family, I feel like everyone on the trip, these people and everyone in LA and in Montana, made me feel very comfortable.
Yeah, quickly adding on to what he said about getting closer with kids, not just from New York City, but also from the students in LA and Montana. I feel like for me, what was very different was that in the past, I used to spend, like, a lot of my summers in Japan with, like, my grandfather and his family. But for me, this one was different because the trip wasn't just learning about Korea, even though that was a big focus. I think it was also a lot about learning about, you know, American people and who we are as Americans. And I think one of the biggest highlights for me was having friends from both LA and Montana. And when I came back, or even when, like, talking about this program and talking about being friends with kids from Montana, I would, like, always get this weird look. But I think that for me, what was very different was being able to interact with students I otherwise would not have been able to. And I learned so much about rural life in America and, you know, like indigenous history as well, because two students were Native American, and that was very culturally enriching. And even just, like, breaking this notion of, you know, rural and urban kids being so different. And I think it's also very similar to how we had this expectation of, you know, what Korean kids would be like, and breaking that barrier and learning that at the end of the day, we're still kids and we can still communicate and have that sort of understanding. So, yeah.
And I think this will be the last comment because we're really running quite behind. But thank you so much for your question.
Yeah, I think that it felt really natural to me. Even though I've never left the country, let alone with my family. So I think it was very different for my family specifically. I think my family tried a lot to keep in contact with me more than I would try to keep in contact with them. But it was I feel as if leaving the country and meeting these different people was definitely an experience that was outside of my comfort zone, but I felt leaving my comfort zone was comfortable itself. So I think, it was different, but it was a good type of different.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. And a big round of applause for these amazing, amazing youth ambassadors. You know, I need you all to move over there a bit on the other side of the screen. Okay. Keep going. Keep going. That's it. And again, for those in the audience, as you know, everywhere we went, we ended by singing, or sometimes began by singing, Arirang, right? So what better way to end our program tonight, right before we give the certificates, by singing Arirang. And I need a volunteer who will lead us in Arirang. Okay? Thank you, because I don't want to start coughing.
Ready? Yes. 하나, 둘, 셋, 시작. 아리랑 아리랑 아라리요 아리랑 고개를 넘어간다 나를 버리고 가시는 힘은 심히도 못 가서 발병 간다